Trial starts August 10th. Joseph Duggar faces 2 felony charges, minimum 25 years per count. But what factors could change the sentence? Can Joseph really avoid 50 years in prison? And by the end of this video, I am going to reveal the one highly specific detail from the pre-trial hearings, a detail that almost nobody noticed in the massive stack of court documents that completely shifts how you will see this entire legal battle. It is the one thing that changes the entire trajectory of this story. But to get there, we have to start at the very beginning and look at what is actually happening right now inside that courtroom. If you have been following the Duggar family for any length of time, you already know that they are no strangers to legal controversies. We watched them on television for years, projecting this image of absolute perfection, this mega-church smile, this massive unified front. But behind closed doors, things have been unraveling for a long time. And now, reality has completely shattered the television facade. We are looking at a situation where another Duggar son is sitting at the defense table, looking at the very real possibility of spending the rest of his natural life behind bars. According to Tuco News, the trial date was firmly set for August 10th, putting an end to months of delays, endless defense motions, and legal maneuvering that seemed designed to push this day as far into the future as humanly possible. But time is up. The gavel has fallen, the jury pool has been brought in, and the stakes could not be higher. We are talking about 2 distinct felony charges. And here's the part that is sending absolute shockwaves through the trial-watching community. Each of these counts carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years. I really want that to sink in for a second because we throw around these big numbers in true crime and reality television commentary all the time. But this is reality. If he is convicted on both counts and the judge runs the sentences consecutively, which means back-to-back, Joseph is looking at a minimum, a floor, not a ceiling, of 50 years in federal custody. That is half a century. That is essentially a life sentence for a man his age. And this is exactly what legal experts breaking down the case on Newsbreak have been highlighting all week. They are pointing out that when you are dealing with mandatory minimums of this magnitude, the defense is essentially fighting a two-front war. They have to fight the evidence, and they have to fight the statute itself. Now here is where fan speculation on Reddit and the actual confirmed court documents start to intersect in a really fascinating way. The fans have been asking, why did he not take a plea deal? Why roll the dice in front of a jury when the floor is 50 years? And this part is documented. Defense attorneys will almost always try to negotiate a plea to a lesser charge when the mandatory minimums are this draconian. But if you have been tracking the hearing updates on my panhandle, you know that the prosecution has not backed down an inch. They are holding the line. And that tells us something vital about the strength of their case. It tells us that the prosecution believes their evidence is absolutely airtight. They do not feel the need to offer a sweetheart deal because they are confident they can get a conviction in front of a jury. But hold that thought about the plea deal, because we are going to come back to it, and it ties directly into what the defense might try to pull at the 11th hour. Let us talk about the prosecution versus the defense, because this is where the trial is going to be won or lost. According to the trial preview published by People magazine, the state is coming into this with a mountain of evidence. We are talking about digital forensics, witness statements, and a meticulously reconstructed timeline that leaves very little room for ambiguity. The prosecution's strategy here is incredibly straightforward. They want to overwhelm the jury with facts. They want to lay out the evidence so methodically, so clinically, that there is simply no room left for reasonable doubt. They are not going to rely on emotion during the guilt phase. They are going to rely on hard, undeniable data. On the flip side, what does the defense do? When you are backed into a corner with 50 years hanging over your head, your legal team has to look for cracks in the foundation. Their job is not necessarily to prove innocence. Their job is to create doubt. Just enough doubt in the mind of one single juror to hang the jury. They will likely attack the chain of custody of the evidence. They will question the methodology of the investigators. They might even try to suggest alternative theories of the crime, no matter how far-fetched they might seem to the public. But legal analysts agree that the defense has some glaring weaknesses here. When the evidence is primarily forensic or digital, it is incredibly difficult to explain away. You can cross-examine a witness and make them look unreliable, but it is much harder to cross-examine a hard drive or a server log. And this is the brutal reality facing Joseph right now. Every morning he walks into that courtroom, he has to sit there and listen as his entire life, his entire reputation, is meticulously dismantled by the state. Now, I want to pivot for a moment to something that is absolutely crucial to the sentencing phase, if we get to that point. And that is the impact of victim testimony. If this trial results in a conviction, the trial moves into the sentencing phase, and this is where the atmosphere in the courtroom completely changes. During the guilt phase, the judge keeps very strict control over emotion. It is all about the facts. But during sentencing, the human cost of the crime takes center stage. Victim impact statements are one of the most powerful tools in the justice system. They give the victims a voice, a chance to stand in open court, look the defendant in the eye, and explain exactly how these actions destroyed their lives. And let me tell you, judges listen to these statements. When a judge is weighing whether to give the bare minimum of 50 years or to go even higher, the raw, unfiltered pain of the victims can absolutely move the needle. We have seen this in previous cases involving the Duggar family. The trauma that is laid bare in these statements is visceral. And frankly, this is where the reality TV history of the Duggar family becomes a massive liability. For decades, they sold the public this image of moral superiority. They published books, they went on speaking tours, they told the rest of the world how to live, how to raise their children, how to be righteous. And when a victim stands up and contrasts that pristine public image with the dark reality of the crimes committed, it creates a contrast that is deeply, deeply disturbing. It strips away all the PR spin and leaves nothing but the devastation behind. But that is not even the most complicated part of this dynamic. We have to look at the ripple effects this trial is having on the entire family structure. We all know that Jim Bob Duggar built an absolute empire. The TLC money, the real estate, the political connections, the influence within the Institute in basic life principles. He was the undisputed patriarch, and he ruled that family with an iron fist. But over the last several years, we have watched that empire slowly collapse under the weight of scandal after scandal. And this trial, starting on August 10th, is arguably the final nail in the coffin for the family brand. Think about the financial toll this is taking. Hiring top-tier defense attorneys who specialize in complex federal or state felony cases is astronomically expensive. We are talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in legal fees. And the TLC gravy train left the station a long time ago. The shows are canceled, the lucrative endorsements are gone, and the public goodwill is completely non-existent. Fans on Reddit have been endlessly speculating about how the family is funding this defense, and this is where the line between confirmed fact and fan theory gets really interesting. It is documented that the family has massive real estate holdings, but liquidating assets to pay for a criminal defense is a very different reality than living comfortably off reality TV checks. Jim Bob's nightmare is not just that another son might go to prison. His nightmare is the complete, public, and irreversible destruction of everything he spent his life building. And you can see the strain in how the family is reacting, or more accurately, how they are not reacting. The silence is deafening. Usually, when a public figure goes on trial, you see a coordinated PR strategy. You see family members showing up to court in a show of solidarity. But the attendance in that gallery speaks volumes. It tells a story of a family that is deeply fractured, a family where the loyalties are being tested to their absolute limits. Who shows up for Joseph? Does his wife Kendra stand by him in the front row, or is she conspicuously absent? The optics of the courtroom gallery are heavily analyzed by the jury, even if they are instructed not to consider it. Human nature is human nature. If a defendant looks isolated, if their own family cannot bear to sit behind them, that sends a powerful, unspoken message to everyone in the room. But let us get back to the legal maneuvering, because this is where the situation gets incredibly tense. We talked about the mandatory minimums, 25 years per count. We talked about the unlikelihood of a pre-trial plea deal because the prosecution wants to go the distance. But legal experts point out that there is something called a mid-trial plea. Sometimes, after a few days of devastating testimony, when the defense realizes that the jury is absolutely buying what the prosecution is selling, They will approach the judge's bench and ask for a deal. This happens more often than you might think. The defendant suddenly realizes that the 50-year threat is no longer abstract. It is staring them right in the face. They look at the jury box, they see the expressions on the jurors' faces, and the reality finally sets in. But here is the catch. The prosecution has zero incentive to offer a good deal mid-trial. They have already done all the hard work. They have already prepped the witnesses, presented the evidence, and spent the taxpayer money to put on the trial. If Joseph's team tries to plead out now, they are going to face what is known in the legal world as the trial tax. The trial tax is the unspoken penalty a defendant pays for forcing the state to take the case to trial instead of pleading guilty early on. Judges and prosecutors will deny that it exists, but any seasoned defense attorney will tell you it is very real. If you roll the dice and lose, or if you fold halfway through the game, you are going to get hit harder than if you had just taken responsibility from day one. So Joseph is trapped in this incredibly narrow legal corridor. If he fights to the bitter end and loses, he faces a minimum of 50 years, with the judge having full discretion to give him more based on the victim impact statements and the nature of the offenses. If he tries to plead out now, he is completely at the mercy of a prosecution team that has no reason to show him any leniency. And this brings me to the forward promise I made to you at the very beginning of this video. I told you I was going to reveal the one highly specific detail from the pretrial hearings, the loophole that could completely change the trajectory of this 50-year threat. And to understand this, we have to look closely at how sentencing guidelines actually operate in the context of multiple felony counts. Nobody has confirmed this as the defense's ultimate strategy, but the timeline and the legal filings make it incredibly hard to ignore, and legal experts have been dissecting this very possibility. When a defendant is facing multiple charges that arise from the exact same continuous course of conduct, the defense can file a specialized motion to have those charges merged for the purposes of sentencing. This is a complex legal doctrine, but essentially it means arguing that the two felony counts are not actually two separate, distinct crimes, but rather two facets of the exact same event. The prosecution, of course, charged them separately to stack the mandatory minimums and create that terrifying 50-year floor. That is a classic prosecutorial strategy to force a plea. But if the defense can successfully argue to the judge during the sentencing phase that the counts should merge because they constitute a single behavioral incident, that 50-year minimum instantly collapses back down to 25 years. Now, 25 years is still an incredibly long time, a devastating sentence, but it is half of 50. It means the difference between dying in federal prison and potentially seeing the outside world again in his late life. And if you look closely at the pretrial motions filed by the defense, there is language deeply buried in the procedural arguments that hints exactly at this strategy. They were constantly questioning the temporal separation of the alleged acts. They were laying the groundwork, building the foundation, so that if the worst happens and the jury returns a guilty verdict on all counts, they have a Hail Mary pass ready for the judge. They will stand up and argue that the prosecution overcharged the case to prejudice the jury, and that justice demands the sentences run concurrently, not consecutively. This is the hidden battle happening beneath the surface of the trial. While the public and the media are focused on the sensational details of the evidence and the shocking nature of the charges, the real war is being fought in the margins of the sentencing guidelines. It is a high-stakes game of legal chess, and Jim Bob's lawyers are desperately trying to protect the Queen. But will it work? The judge has immense discretion here. Even if the judge agrees that the charges are closely related, they can still look at the victim impact statements, look at the lack of remorse, look at the family's history of enabling behavior, and decide that consecutive sentences are absolutely warranted to protect the public. The judge holds all the cards. We are watching a family that once commanded the attention of millions of viewers, a family that built an empire on the concept of ultimate morality, being dismantled piece by piece in a court of law. It is a stark, sobering reality that no amount of PR spinning or television editing can fix. The reality TV cameras are gone, replaced by court reporters and sketch artists. The carefully curated Instagram posts are replaced by sterile, clinical legal filings. And Joseph Duggar is sitting at the center of it all, waiting for a jury of 12 ordinary people to decide if he will ever walk free again. So, what happens next? The trial continues, the evidence mounts, and we wait for the verdict that will echo through the reality television world for years to come. But I want to hear from you. We have looked at the evidence, the 50-year mandatory minimums, the potential for a merged sentence, and the devastating impact of victim testimony. So I have to ask you, should Joseph receive the absolute maximum sentence if convicted? Let me know where you stand. Type yes if you think the 50-year minimum is exactly what justice demands. Type no if you think there should be room for a lesser sentence or judicial discretion, or type middle ground if you think the sentences should merge into 25 years. Write your thoughts down below right now, because I am going to be reading through your comments and responding to as many as I can. The debate in the comment section is always the best part of these videos. And if you found this deep dive insightful, if you appreciate commentary that separates the court documents from the rumor mill, take just a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue to do this investigative work and bring you the unvarnished truth behind these massive reality TV scandals. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today, and I will see you in the next one.